Welcome to Spicer and Company. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, our hearts are heavy today as we share some sad news with you. After a month-long battle with COVID-19, successful businessman, former presidential candidate, and our own Newsmax host, Herman Cain. He's passed away today. Sean, I knew you knew him. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. This is, we always give Trump being credit for this guy who entered politics as a businessman, came in and transformed things. It was interesting. In a different way, Herman Cain did that in the 2012 cycle. He jumped in. He had been CEO of Godfather's Pizza. He had taken it from ruin, built it back. His investors bought it. He was like this rags to riches story, and then kind of migrated into politics after the successful career on the in the Federal Reserve and all of this business background. And he walks in and he just goes 999. And suddenly, all of these politicians are now responding to Herman Cain about tax policy. And it was kind of the same way, in a very indifferent, but in a very analogous way, how Trump entered the presidential race in 2016, threw his business experience down, and then the debate centered around him. And for a long time, Herman Cain was the guy because he had a real understanding of what happened in the business world, how people were dealing with, their taxes and the economy and job creation. And he understood marketing, Lindsay. He knew how to sell things to people, and he sold a really interesting policy, and he transformed that presidential cycle. Just an amazing individual. This obviously comes on the heels today of John Lewis's funeral in Atlanta. I hope we have enough time to recognize both individuals for the amazing lives that they've lived and the impact that they've had in different ways on our society. But it's truly a loss, not just for the country, but for our Newsmax family. So, that aside, we've got a great show ahead. The thing that's been really interesting, and I know there's been a lot of talk recently about kids going back to school. We spent a lot of time on the show talking about it. One of the nation's biggest teachers union, the American Federation of Teachers, Lindsay, they came out and they're saying that they support their teachers going on strike. Now, I get they're very concerned about their teachers' health and safety, right? And that makes a ton of sense. But now they're saying that they're not going to return to the classroom. And you've got governors, meanwhile, like Ron DeSantis down in Florida, who are pushing back. In an article in Politico, he says he touts the whole return of in-person classrooms, saying that they'll go on as best. And I guess the question is whether it's online or in person, which is the best way to do this. I want to bring into the discussion Congressman Dan Meuser. He's on the House Education Committee. He's from Pennsylvania. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Sean.
It's interesting. Washington, D.C. just today said that they're going online. We saw Georgetown University. Obviously, that's online, but it's a private institution. They're going online. Everybody kind of initially really wanted to open up. And then you're seeing now this kind of boomerang where within a few days, a couple of weeks, everybody's doing this. This is an interesting analogy that I want to throw by you. I feel like it's could be like Major League Baseball, right? Everybody kind of creates this whole system. They get out there on the field, and then a few days into the game, they realize they might have to change the deal. Do you think that we're going to rush students back into the classroom in a lot of cases and then realize that COVID cases spike in the classrooms or something happens and then we have to pull them back out? Or are we doing this in the right way?
Well, look, it's very, very important that we get our children back into schools. Parents agree. The American Association of Pediatrics agree. The science agrees. Young people, particularly that age, don't transfer the infection. So it's very, very important. From a congressional level, we've allocated $105 billion towards anything that schools need to make a safe environment, PPEs, more social distancing capabilities, the plexiglass, temperature checks, testing. Look, everything that is there. You got some great school districts, particularly throughout my district and throughout Pennsylvania, that are leaning in, that are being smart, that are being strategic, that are planning on going back to school, certainly offering remote where possible, where the family can assist. But this just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense, Congressman. It's funny. The teachers union in this article I was reading today want it both ways. They say, hey, we don't want to go back into the classroom. And I understand. I mean, their job is to look out for these guys, whatever. And I think to your point, you're right. A lot of these schools are doing all the right stuff and trying to take the precautions. But then the teachers union are also saying, but we don't want to, the online stuff is becoming too demanding on the teachers. It's like, you can't have it both ways, guys. You can't say we're not going back into the classroom and then we don't want to do the online stuff. We're doing a disservice to these kids and to the parents, frankly, that are either trying to go back to work or trying to make sure that their kids don't fall behind.
Yeah, there's no question. You take a survey of parents, I think it's about 83% want the children to go back to school. Nobody loves the children more than their parents, but they understand how very important it is. And the kids have been out of school now for close to 5 months. Look, if this thing does continue, the last thing that we want to do is not prepare now in a health and safety manner for them to go back to school, just like opening up the economy. And then you get something on, you get the Los Angeles teacher union put something out that says, well, we'll go back to school if you get Medicare for all, if you defund charter schools, and if the third one was defunding the police. I mean, what's going on here? Are we trying to prolong this problem, or are we trying to solve it in a smart, all-American way?
Exactly. Congressman, I want to pivot because you've got a bill out there right now that's addressing potential fraud in mail-in votes. Before we get to that, I want to ask you just a couple quick, simple questions for our audience, right? First of all, yes or no, is there potential fraud if we do all mail-in vote?
Absolutely.
Okay. Number two, is there a difference between absentee voting and all mail-in voting?
Yes.
Thank you. Because this is the problem. The media will not tell you the difference. Every state in the union has mail-in voting has absentee voting and allows voters to request a ballot. But tell me why you introduced a bill and what you're concerned about.
Well, we introduced a bill and it's very, very specific to stop mail-in voter fraud. And when you send out the type of ballots in some states that just go to every registered voter that has been registered over the last 5 years, I have friends, for instance, that call me and say, hey, I have rental properties. I got 4 different ballots covering the last 4 years for people that don't even live there any longer. And some of them have passed away. From an absentee standpoint in Pennsylvania, at least we now have a no excuse absentee. But look, it creates a temptation.
Yes.
And it creates a real temptation. This bill is for multiple fraudulent ballots, which means more than one. But you just look at Paterson, New Jersey, just this past June, 20% of the mail-in ballots were invalidated for false information, fictitious signatures, and other discrepancies with them. 20%, over 3,000 ballots.
Can you do me a favor? When you get those constituents that say that they're getting someone's ballot that's either moved away or died, will you call attention to that? Because the media doesn't want you to believe that there's fraud, and we need those kind of examples to show people what the potential fraud will be.
Right. And the last thing that any of us would want as Americans is to suppress a vote, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's not what but it's one citizen, one vote. And a fraudulent vote certainly suppresses, in fact, it steals a legal citizen's vote. So look, if somebody's not falsifying signatures or falsifying their name on a ballot, they have nothing to worry about. If they are doing it, well, they're going to go to jail for a pretty long period of time.
I hope they do. And Congressman, we're out of time. I want you to just read you one quick thing, because this is what you're up against, what we're up against. This is from Politico today. They said, quote, also regular reminder that mail-in voting is the same as absentee. That's not true. Absentee, the voter requests the ballot. Mail-in ballot, as you correctly point out, sir, is when the state sends everyone on the rolls of ballot. And I think we need to do a better job, and I appreciate and I applaud what you're doing to call attention to this.
Yes, absolutely. It is important. The message is important, but we need to pass this law to stop mail-in voter fraud. And again, if people have one citizen, one vote, they have nothing to worry about.
Thank you, Congressman, for being a leader in this issue, because we need to explain what's happening and we need to combat any attempt to undermine one person, one vote. So thank you for joining us. I hope to have you back soon.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
You bet. All right, guys, the fight over DACA could have an unintentional benefit to this president and how he uses his powers. We're going to be talking about that when we come back. Plus, we're going to continue our Battleground 2020 series, find out why Wisconsin is so important in this election. Stick around.